Hello and welcome to this first of 2017 energy webinar with EON Reality. It's a great pleasure to have you all join in for this session. I will start with a brief overview, cover some technology and case studies. Truly it's an exciting time in the VR and AR fields. Just coming back from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas last week, seeing a lot of new technology in both areas that's going to impact how we use this in the energy and industrial sectors. At EON Reality, we've been involved with the energy sector for a number of years, working with high-end simulators like we see here with the iCube technology, a little bit like a holodeck for those of you who are Star Trek fans. If you ever want to come and experience one, please reach out and we'll schedule you for one of our showrooms or IDCs around the world. As a brief introduction, I'd like to talk a little bit about our approach to this field. We are a software applications developer primarily, and we've always had this approach to be agnostic to which hardware the customer or end user can use. And we often talk about the phone to dome solutions, going from immersive displays at the very high end, like domes and cubes that we talked about recently, down to mobile phones or wearable AR glasses and everything in between. We spend a lot of time at EON to quality assure and assess different platforms before we bring them out into the market. And the pace of change is accelerating, there's no doubt about it. A little bit about the company. We've been around for plus 17 years. We're definitely one of the early adopters in VR overall, but specifically in knowledge transfer, which is our key focus. This boils down to industry training and vocational education primarily. We do a little bit of work in what we call edutainment with a solution called the iDome. And we have hundreds of industry customers, academic organizations, and government partners around the world. A little bit about EON in the news. This is from a launch of one of our satellite offices and IDCs in Mexico from 2016. And I'll talk a little bit more about what IDCs are as we go through the presentation, but it's a way for us to build capacity to help all of you out in industry to develop the many solutions and applications that are needed for the future. Our vision boils down to knowledge is a human right, and the ultimate goal is to make knowledge available, affordable, and accessible for everybody on the planet. This is a big long-term goal, but we have been able to do this in some fun and exciting ways. One way we did recently, which we did a big study on, was training truck drivers in Ethiopia using augmented reality. And we were able to deliver this for a few dollars per trainee, down from about $20,000 per trainee when they used the real equipment to train. So sometimes mobile, AR, VR can be a great equalizer when it comes to training and education. We execute the vision with four fundamental parts of our business. One is our end-to-end platform solution, specifically developed for knowledge transfer. This is not a game engine. It supports enterprise data, connects you with LMS systems, etc., etc., etc. Unmatched global reach. We have today 22 locations with interactive digital centers and entrepreneur schools where we build capacity and support our customers worldwide. In-depth domain penetration. We never develop applications or solutions in a vacuum. We always do it with the experts. Sometimes this comes from our industry customers. and sometimes from academic customers, professors, experts, and sometimes we bring them in to make sure we develop the applications in the proper way. The audience is growing very rapidly. We've had a large number of downloads. I think we have applications now that exceed 1 million users. But more interestingly, we've gone in a few years from a potential number of publishing platforms ranging in the tens of thousands, high-end projector equipment, high-end specialized VR equipment, to be able to do effective VR and AR on a mobile phone. And I think at this moment we are a little bit over 2 billion Android, iOS devices in the world. And with IoT growing so quickly, this will eclipse what we have today in the next few years in terms of sensors and devices we can reach. So that is a very exciting time, because it means that it's very cost-effective and easy to reach everyone in an enterprise. End-to-end solution. Let's talk a little bit about this. So I mentioned we have our own platform. This is something we developed since we started in 1999. And we've always linked very closely with, for instance, CAD data, GIS data, but also other types of formats that are becoming more and more important, like simple 3D scanning, 360 video, images. And then with the tools, you can develop using advanced development tools, develop very complex simulations. We'll talk about one project we did with ExxonMobil over the last couple of years, which we have licensed for a 3D operator training system. But we also have simple tools that anyone in an enterprise can use to set up simple training simulations. And today this is all done on a cloud delivery infrastructure. You can train individually or in a multi-user environment, and you can then reach all of the big publishing formats in terms of VR devices, such as headsets from Oculus or Vive, to iCubes or AR glasses like HoloLens or ODG. And this depicts a little bit the phone to dome range of solutions. Going into the details a little bit, we have always worked with the advanced development tools, or pretty much since the start of the company. And in recent years, we've added a lot of functionality on the mobile platform. So this is what we refer to as the AVR cloud-based platform components. So we have a content library off the shelf, but we can also implement custom libraries for a specific client or a specific vertical. We have the easy-to-use content creation tools I referred to in Creator. Multi-user functionality. This platform can be white-labeled and branded to any use case or customer. And we can provide, if required, hosting of content and services in the cloud. If you want to get a good idea on what this platform does, you can download an application called EON Experience AVR, EON Experience AVR, and we can provide a link at the end, so you can do that very easily on your iOS or Android device, and that will give you a good feel for how this works. There's a number of additional modules like geophysical, artificial intelligence, LMS link, CMS, etc. that can be added, but this is an add-on service compared to the base offering. We also have many segment-specific solutions. Since the topic today is energy, we'll focus on a number of case studies in the energy sector, but this outlines the areas that we are active within and developing applications in. And then we have the phone to dome ecosystem of devices. Some of them very consumer oriented, and some of them much more specialized. So depending on the use case, we might use one of these or two or three of these to reach the required audience. I wanted to talk a little bit about a recent use case, and this is one that we're deploying for a number of clients. It's an enterprise VR training simulator. We've chosen in this case to work with the HTC Vive, could be Oculus as well, but a low-cost gaming VR headset. And of course, a huge benefit here is that you get this at a very low entry price point, a couple of $1,000 together with a computer. And you can do a photorealistic representation of the world. Trainers can administrate the training remotely and collaborate with the learner. This can be integrated with your LMS or enterprise system like SAP and Oracle, for instance. Can be other systems. We're completely agnostic when it comes to that. And you can also save what's going on in the lesson. And we see this being used in engineering, pharmaceutical equipment training, etc. And here you see the storyboards. The idea is to replace a real learning environment with real equipment with a virtual one. And while the learner is immersed, you have the instructor, training leader, discussing different aspects of the training. Huge benefit with this is that you can do this completely safe, even for novice users. This talks a little bit about the what I just described here, so the integration between the different pieces and how the learner uses the Vive while the instructor uses a simple web portal through a tablet or a laptop computer or something like that. And this shows a little bit a typical integration case, again, depending on what database system, learning management system you use, this might look a little bit different, but this is something we've done for many years in industry applications overall. Talked a little bit about our global reach. So this is an interactive digital center hub. This example here is the first one we established, which is from Manchester, UK, which is also our European headquarters. We established this one in 2012, and it's a school for VR/AR developers. We have to date educated over 200 people in the Manchester location. We built a studio there of over 50 people. The vast majority, something like 90% plus, have been recruited from the school. The studio is the app content factory, and we built this as a sustainable business based on services and more broad app development that could be offered to many locations around the world. Manchester is also a spoke in the hub of our global distribution network, and this entails not only content development but also hardware delivery, integration, setup, especially for the high-end type systems. And here you can see a little bit of our footprint, which is growing pretty rapidly. We've recently signed IDCs in Norway, in China, in the Caribbean, and so forth. Let's talk a little bit about specifically the energy sector and knowledge transfer problems that are typical. So this, by the way, is a typical learning environment. We've seen in many studies that technicians, which we tend to deal with quite a bit in energy, electricians or mechanical technicians, they don't really like this learning modality. They'd rather show me do it, use that approach. And that's why VR works really well with them, because it gets much closer to actually doing it. Some of the typical problems, though, is that there is cost. You spend time and resources on training. There's a huge amount of complexity. Employees need to be very proficient and change rapidly as equipment become more complex. There's big risk, hazardous situations that employees might face, and especially new learners. That's a big issue. Quality, again, classroom training does not give hands-on experience. Difficult to assess. Many traditional evaluation methods that emphasize classroom performance are difficult to assess what the knowledge transfer value is. Many academic studies show that the effectiveness of that modality can be as poor as 10% compared to hands-on learning. And VR definitely moves very much closer to hands-on learning. Let's talk about our AVR solutions, Augmented Virtual Reality solution for energy. We, as I mentioned, I worked many years in this field, and we spent most of our time in geophysical exploration, one part visualization of survey results. We'll show some examples on that. Another one is training using different equipment, for instance, like a vertical seismic profile. Planning, this is maybe the smallest field, but can be very impactful. Review, validation, look at safety scenarios early in the design process. So here we see an example with the iCube again. And then last but not least, because this is the big one in terms of use, is production, where we work with operators, team of operators to optimize processes, provide specific training, and again, train safety and what-if scenarios in a very safe, repetitive environment. Collaboration, I've mentioned this a couple of times. This is an extension to the EON platform, and we're able to very effectively collaborate and tie together multiple users between physical locations using today mobile devices on one end and high-end devices on the other end. Let's speak a little bit about evolution of delivery methods. This is a graph that was put together by one of our clients. It's a mining company, but we think it applies pretty broadly to how many companies do it today. So you have a combination of classroom learning, e-learning, and some type of simulator. What VR adds is this blue outline here, where it, of course, impacts the e-learning by becoming more immersive, and the simulator delivery by having much more flexible and lower cost simulators. So instead of doing one thing with a drilling rig simulator, you can have an iCube that can solve both geophysical, planning, and operator type scenarios. And then last, you have the augmented reality, which is a new addition, which can be used in training, but can also extend to being used in the field in a knowledge worker modality. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this goes over a little bit the kind of delivery modalities for these different scenarios. Our principles are based on using VR for simulation-based learning, learn faster, remember longer, make better decisions. There are many studies that show the effectiveness of knowledge transfer when you use VR versus traditional methods. But it can also have a huge impact on retention, which from a safety aspect can be even more important. AR, we see the big use being knowledge-based injection. So when you need information, you can call upon it. And this can be out in the field, for instance, geophysical, contextual information, or in the plant environment. And then we work with our customers providing service-based solutions for specific scenarios. So what are some of the benefits with using this? One is that you can have faster learning. You don't have to travel. It's available anytime. You can really provide that contextual information at any point in the process, even out in the field. And of course, you can have a big impact on safety. Overall, we see this leads to better engagement, and you're able to very easily assess trainees and make sure they're certified or meet the requirements, as you can save all the information out, typically through your LMS system. Let's talk a little bit about the AVR cloud-based components. We've already covered part of this, but I just want to remind everyone that this is a solution that can be white label and implemented for any specific solution. And this allows our end users to avoid reinventing the wheel and focus more on the content and the applications and solving the really important problems that you face. Some of the components, again, cloud-based platform. We can also implement this inside a network if that's required for security reasons. We provide a server software license. Typically, we start with a 300 user login for teachers and students. This can be expanded depending on the use case. We provide experience AR, VR, and mobile content, either consisting of existing objects and applications that we have or custom developed. In industry and energy, you have the benefit of having access to enterprise data already, such as CAD data. So this part can be greatly improved by reusing existing data. You have a knowledge library, multi-user. You can publish to all the different devices and brand this application to your own look and feel and needs and so forth. Typical deployment is up to 40 man days for a complete solution. Can be less for a more limited study. And then, as we talked about, we have some additional modules, and I'll cover some of these later on. So I think we'll move forward from here. I talked about retention and knowledge transfer improvement. You can also see attention levels improve. But this is kind of a bottom line study. The first case here is for a field technician doing a shank adapter change, and this company, so an independent study done outside EON, saw a 92% cost savings potential by using AR versus traditional delivery methods. By replacing a simulator with a more, by replacing classical training with a VR-based simulator, so a flexible simulator for a drilling rig, this other case saw a potential of 63% cost savings. So, and you see the numbers behind it here a little bit. So I'm not saying every case will be like this, but the potential for savings and synergies are huge overall. Some of the benefits with the platform: efficiency, customization. You can customize it to your brand. We have this agnostic hardware support, and we all know that the hardware market moves very quickly. There's billions invested over the last few years, and we take that problem away from our clients as we validate and assess all the different platforms, and when they're performing, we bring them into the fold so you can make fast and effective use of them. It's also very fast to implement. We've spent hundreds of man years in development time developing this platform. So that allows you to do this in a very short time frame, maybe months or weeks in some cases. The platform itself is easy to use. Once it's set up, you can add content and applications yourself. And it's off the shelf and really an end-to-end solution, which leads to a very cost-effective way to implement VR and AR. Okay, so that was a lot of background information. Let's talk a little bit about a few use cases before we wrap this up and go to the Q&A session. And since I've talked a lot, I'm going to go ahead and show an example here. I can't show you a fully immersive example, so it'll be a desktop example. This is an operator essential training application that we developed for BP a few years ago. And I start here with a basic walkthrough of the application. As I do this, I can bring out markers to request where I have scaffolding. I can navigate through this environment. I can bring out my PNID to see how the process diagram looks. And we'll use this to interact. And I can also take pictures. So if I'm doing this procedure walkthrough, I can document that and put in a report to my manager. Next step would be to do a risk assessment. And this is something we always include in a procedure. And here, since it's an outdoor facility, we have the elements to take into account. So might not be perfect conditions to do this. Another thing I have to look at here is what else is going on in the plant. And we can see here that there are some welding tanks. There's a guy down here doing some maintenance. So I have to physically walk through and decide, is this going to impact what I'm doing or not? And all of these objects are randomly placed, so next time I run this, it will look a little different. Let's do a few steps of the procedure, which is an isolation procedure, sometimes also called lockout tagout procedure. And this trainer was developed to be deployed on a very low-end VR platform to about 5,000 trainees per year. And it's a standalone trainer, so it's not a team trainer. Again, we can do this multi-user, but this is a team trainer. So we'll simulate using a radio, talking to the control room and so forth. Just like a good pilot, we'll start with a checklist. And the first step here is to activate what's called the ESDF module. So I'll call up the control room. And as I do a request to the control room, I typically have 2 or 3 options. And here I'm going to ask the control room to activate to close this valve so we can continue to the next step. Once that's done, I have to visually inspect that this is closed. And if I know exactly where to go, I can use the walkthrough. If I'm new to this, we built in waypoints in the diagram, the PNID. Let me zoom in here a little bit. You can actually see the information. So we connect the engineering view with the real view. So here we have 4110. I click on it, it takes me over there. Now, I had requested for this to be closed, but it's open. So in the simulator, there's a randomness built in, so things can go wrong, just like in the real world. So now I have to know how to do a manual override. And to do that, I have to call up the control room again and tell them that we need someone to come down and close this valve manually. This takes a little longer. We'll do a quick countdown and not make them wait for half an hour. And then we're going to move forward, and I'll do the next step kind of quickly here. But just so you get an idea, so we have a number of bypass valves. I have to make sure that they're closed. I'm going to check them off here. Should be 3 in total. Once that's done, I'll go to the toolbox and use the chain tool to actually lock them up. And I also have to lock up this ESDF unit. Once that's done, we move forward to the next step, which is to go to this 206 valve and do the next steps. All in all, there is some 50 steps in this procedure, so I think I'm going to stop there, but it gives you a good idea on a typical operator application. The last module, by the way, you saw when I loaded this, are 4 modules, reinstatement, and it's basically doing this backwards to be ready for production again. Okay, one of the things that BP looked at during the study was retention, and there is a study that's published on this, and if you're interested, we can provide it to you. that showed 1 year after that this type of VR game-based learning had 80% better retention 1 year after training delivery versus classroom case study-based scenarios. Saudi Aramco, so here we developed a number of training applications around a drill site, vertical seismic profile, mostly for geophysical type training. And this is the VSP or logging truck, part of the simulator delivery here. And the primary use delivery platform here was iCube and eye-catcher single screen stereoscopic devices. PetroSkills, we worked with them to develop a virtual field trip. So instead of taking a team of students out in the field and spending time, which is the most valuable asset we have, and travel cost, you can do this in the classroom, one of PetroSkills locations. So this looks at outcrop type scenarios, strike planes, plunge cross sections, etc. Kepco, this is from the nuclear industry, where we developed a familiarization VR-based trainer for all staff that come into a nuclear plant like this. And Petrobras developed a number of simulation-based training, maintenance, safety simulators over the years. So that gives you an idea of a couple of use cases. Here's another one, RASGAS. This is a geophysical application as well, where we used LiDAR as input. And a lot of these famous rock outcrops in the Middle East are disappearing due to urban activity development, basically. So it also had an aspect of capturing for future generations some of these outcrops that will soon be gone or different in the way they're accessible, etc. Technical colleges, not to forget, we do work a lot with technical colleges, especially in the early training, and here's a good example from ITE in Singapore. Let's take a look at a little video here. So that was an example from IT in Singapore, where we developed a series of modules around offshore rigs, and this was a lifting operation. They used the iCube primarily for this, and it's a 1 to 3 learners at a time. And you saw here that the rigger was going through and checking for a twisted belt, and if you miss one part of the procedure, not only you get rated lower, you'll also hear a loud bang in the iCube as the load falls down, and it's pretty impactful. You don't make that mistake more than once, and of course the beauty is that it's a completely safe way to do the training. Here's another example. I mentioned we've been working together with ExxonMobil over a number of years and developed this 3D operator training simulator. And in 2015 we had the great pleasure of receiving an award to license and commercialize this technology for any client in or outside of oil and gas. And when we started this, they wanted to provide a holistic training environment that could tie together the entire team of operators and the control room operator. And one of the big drivers is that it used to take maybe about 15 years to achieve mastery for a technician. And in today's world, no company has that kind of time to get to the expert level for their technicians. It has to happen faster. So VR and AR was seen as one main driver to achieve this accelerated timeline for achieving mastery. And again, connecting the console operator, field operator in a team training environment was something that was not offered or available today. So we were also able to provide something completely new.
Reality, 3D immersive environments to develop a simulator that could be used to train, operators or young engineers joining the oil and gas industry. This system is great because you could basically train on a specific scenario, do it over and over again in a safe and controlled environment without having to worry that, you're going to actually cause an issue in the plant. This environments to develop.
So that was one of our partners from ExxonMobil talking a little bit about the iCube and showing how this technology works. We've since, of course, moved this technology, which connects a control room simulator with all the data to a VR model, so you get a very flexible, scalable training environment, down to lower-end VR devices, such as HTC Vive, for instance. And we've developed a series of generic modules ranging from simple compressor, distillation column, and so forth for colleges and new employees to train on in a general environment. You can also, with this technology, develop specific simulators for plants years before they're available and address training the workforce in this way. Some of the feedback is that it helps with localization, quicker recovery, turnaround planning, critical procedure execution, etc. Why do we see so much growth right now? One part is, of course, the investment levels in VR and AR. But there's a lot of analysts looking at this today, and there are a lot of studies out there. We're not sure who is right or who is wrong, but there's a general direction that's very, very interesting. And of course, video games drive the development today, but it's also allowing the other 70% of the market, such as engineering, military, healthcare, education, to benefit from this at a totally different cost level. Here's a little bit information from a study that Goldman Sachs did last year, which we think was a very good, well thought out study. So let's take a look at what they have to say.
We think 2016 is a very transformative year for the area of virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality is what we believe will be the next generation computing platform, along with augmented reality. And the difference between the two is virtual reality, you wear a head-mounted display and it completely blocks your field of view so you can't see through it, Whereas augmented reality, it's like wearing a pair of glasses, and you'll be able to look through and see the environment around you with a display highlighting whatever images it's going to project to you. By 2025, we see this market approaching $80 billion, or about the size of the desktop market today. But while today virtual reality is primarily thought of as a place for hardcore gamers to spend their spare time, it's increasingly impacting sectors that people touch every day. For example, in real estate, instead of having to go see 50 homes with an agent over the weekend, you might be able to put on a pair of virtual reality glasses or a head-mounted display at your realtor's office and be able to do a virtual walkthrough of what those properties might look like, and therefore maybe you could eliminate 30 out of the 50 on your list and be much more efficient with your time. It's being used in medical institutions, at hospitals, to train doctors, to teach them how to be better surgeons. It's transforming the ability for educational institutions to go on a field trip and to be able to experience the Great Wall of China firsthand without having to take a trip. What's different about virtual reality today versus, say, 10 years ago when people thought this was going to become mainstream is that the technology has started to catch up. We've had processor speeds. Things like Moore's Law have really transformed chip speed. Graphics cards have gotten more powerful, so your ability to see the number of frames per second that your eyes need to see so that you don't feel queasy as you're starting to use these types of devices. There are several barriers to virtual reality and augmented reality adoption at this point. Clearly, the price points right now are high for the average consumer, but ultimately, as with any piece of technology, we expect economies of scale to accrue over time, and we would expect the price reductions to follow what we've seen with other hardware devices, similar to what we've seen in the laptop and desktop market. At the end of the day, we think virtual and augmented reality will be as transformative as when we used to see people walking around the streets of New York City holding a big brick to their ear and talking to someone that we couldn't see on the other end. We think this technology has the potential to transform how we interact with almost every industry today, and we think it will be equally transformative both from a consumer and an enterprise perspective.
Okay. Initially, Goldman Sachs early last year estimated the total market to about $80 billion by 2025, and in July they revised this estimate to what you see here, so about 95 billion. And maybe more interesting than the exact size of the market, which I think is difficult to estimate, is to look at the proportions of hardware versus software applications, and EON being in the software solution business, providing a platform that makes it easy to implement the software aspect of this. We really feel we can bring a lot of efficiencies to our clients in the energy and other markets as well, and it's substantial numbers in terms of implementation, adoption that we see here. Let's talk a little bit about the future, and then we'll wrap up in the next couple of minutes here. One thing that we saw at CES last week was a big increase in the number of companies providing augmented reality solutions. We've also seen an enormous increase in investment from the venture capital market into companies that are working with augmented reality. Again, EON being agnostic, we work with many. I put ODG's R7 glasses on here, one of our partners that we've been implementing a couple of advanced R&D projects with during 2016 for clients. But we also work with other ones like Microsoft HoloLens, for instance, depending on the use case. The interesting thing when you start to look at the knowledge worker market, a little bit connected with IoT, it's going to be a much larger market than the VR market is today. And the main reason is that you're going to be able to bring this out in your daily work. So it's not just a training, it's linking cloud computing, Internet of Things, AI, through an augmented reality interface. And we already work extensively with AR on phones or tablets using marker-based tracking. And the step now to wearable augmented reality is for us relatively small with the platform that we've developed. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and thank you.